Welcome to this edition of the Arklatex Crime Files. I'm Jonathan McCall. It's a story that has gained worldwide attention in recent weeks. 10 inmates from a New Orleans jail breaking out in the middle of the night in a bold escape that has many wondering how they did it. Right now, 2 of those inmates still on the run. In this edition of the Arklatex Crime Files, we talk with a retired FBI special agent about the mission to try to get those 2 inmates back into custody. A bold breakout in the middle of the night. 10 inmates from the Orleans Correctional Center in New Orleans busting through this wall for a daring escape. Nearly a month after the May 16th getaway, 8 of the 10 inmates are back behind bars. 2 of them arrested after a chase with law enforcement near Houston. But 2 more remain on the run. One of them is Antoine Massey, a man claiming to be Massey, posting a 9-minute public plea on Instagram, calling on rappers and even President Donald Trump for help.
My name is Antoine Massey. I'm one of the ones that was let out in GC.
Derek Groves is the other man, also on the run. So far, 16 people now face charges for allegedly helping the inmates. Nearly 200 local, state, and federal law enforcement agents continue the now nationwide manhunt. Michael Anderson, a retired FBI special agent, giving us an inside look at the law enforcement playbook to get Massey and Groves back into custody. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us here about this case that really has just gained national attention about these 10 inmates that escaped from the Orleans Correctional Center. It's almost 3 weeks since this happened. 2 of those inmates are still on the run tonight. A few days ago, there was a video where one of them went on Instagram Live talking about, he didn't escape. He was, let out, and calling on President Trump and, rapper Lil Wayne to, get him some legal help. 3 weeks into this, 3 weeks into this, Michael, as someone who used to work for the FBI, what's going on with regards to operational from the standpoint of what's kind of going on behind the scenes that people may not be aware of on what law enforcement is doing to try to track down these 2 remaining suspects?
You have federal, state, and local law enforcement working collaboratively on this investigation and really leaving no stone unturned. Law enforcement is interviewing and pushing hard on the family, friends, and associates of the remaining escapees. It's highly probable that they're receiving help of some type, whether that's monetary help, a vehicle, a place to stay. They are receiving help of some type. So as a result, law enforcement will be pushing the family, the associates, any friends, and really interviewing them hard to try to resolve this case.
Michael, you mentioned the fact there are a number of levels of different agencies, state, local, federal partnerships working together. What's happening with these conversations between these particular agencies? Because obviously there has to be information being shared amongst them to try to, get these 2 into custody. What's it like inside of that room, and what kind of information are they talking about right now?
So the cooperation between the law enforcement agency, regardless of the level, is going to be seamless. They are working together as one team to solve this investigation. They're sharing information they've received. They're sharing tips. They're sharing intelligence. One other area all law enforcement will be pursuing on this case will be reaching out to their informants to see if they have any information that can lead to catching these outstanding escapees. There's a reward offered for this case, and that's always an inducement for any informant to provide information.
How how strange is this, I guess, for 3 weeks to go by? Typically, I don't know if there's necessarily a timetable. We know that the other 8 were caught relatively early on. I think, there was, some stretches where it may have lagged into a week. We saw, 2 of these escaped inmates who went as far as North Houston, just north of Houston, where they were caught as well. What are those law enforcement agencies? What are they looking at? I know you mentioned the fact that they're getting potentially getting help from people on the outside. What other information are they looking at when it comes to possible location and how their movements may be right now?
The difficulty in this case is you don't have any telephones, you don't have any emails, things like that that a normal person would have that you could use to track someone. So unless they've gotten some intelligence that leads them to believe there's a phone involved, it's very difficult to track these. Typically, most of these escapee cases are solved within just a couple of days, if not less than that. And so the longer it has gone, the more difficult it becomes to catch these two remaining escapees because the circle expands farther and farther as time grows.
What you mentioned the fact that circle continuing to grow, obviously 3 weeks in. Um, how rare is this? You talked a little bit about, typically these, cases, the escapees are caught in a matter, of days, a very short amount of time. How rare is it for that large of an amount of people to escape? Obviously, you have a large number of them back into custody, but how rare is it for an event like that to continue to stretch out, more than 2 weeks, now entering a third week?
It's very rare for a large number of escapees to escape from a prison of any type. Very, very rare that this happens. And the fact that it's gone on 2 weeks leads me to believe that they are receiving help of some type.
Do they have an idea? Because you mentioned the fact that circle is kind of getting larger and larger, and as time goes on, there's less, I don't want to say likelihood of them getting caught, but there's obviously more time for them to expand that circle, for them to kind of get away from law enforcement. Do they have an idea right now on where these gentlemen could be?
We don't have any idea what type information they have. They have not made that public. However, they're exhausting all leads to resolve this. Again, they're looking for tips, and I encourage the public to reach out with any information they can provide.
I guess in the mind of a criminal, obviously you've been an FBI agent for many years. You understand what's going on. If I'm one of these two escaped inmates right now, what is, kind of walk us through the mindset of what they are now thinking, because they have to stay not one, not two, possibly three steps ahead of law enforcement in order to continue remaining on the run.
I would think these inmates are doing everything they can not to draw attention to themselves. So they're going to be laying low. If they're driving, they're going to make sure they're doing the speed limit. They're going to be doing everything they can to make sure they do not violate the law of any type to bring attention to themselves.
Do you think obviously law enforcement agencies are working around the clock to try to get as much information as possible about these two remaining inmates? Are there conversations being had with the other inmates as well?
Absolutely. They're going to be interviewing, as I said, family members, friends, associates, but they will also be interviewing other inmates who maybe were aware of their escape that they were going to do, or maybe participated, provided some type of assistance to that escape. They will definitely be talking to all the inmates in that surrounding area to try to get any information from them that might provide some assistance to this investigation.
14 people so far have been arrested in connection to this escape, and in various ways. Obviously, there are people who are accused of helping the inmates once they got out. Some family members. Obviously, we know of a jail worker who's charged with turning off the water and things of that nature as well. What are some of the lessons that uh, officials in New Orleans are going to learn from this, as well as law enforcement agencies locally, statewide, and nationally on the federal level as well? What are some of the takeaways that will happen as a result of what's happening right now?
After this investigation is completed and these inmates are caught, law enforcement will sit down all law enforcement involved in this case will sit down and they will look at what caused this to happen. Are there best practices that need to be implemented to ensure this doesn't happen again?
Is this a case? Is this just a case that's an anomaly, or do you think this was kind of a perfect storm of things that kind of aligned all together and just was kind of executed, and it really kind of just played out the way it has because of possibly the planning on the inside and just some of the maneuvers from those escapees on executing on executing that on that escape.
I do think this escape is an anomaly. Most jails, most prisons are very, very secure. And in this case, the inmates exploited some vulnerability. And I think what we need to look at is to see what caused this to happen. Inmates are always going to look for weaknesses that they can exploit. And in this case, obviously, there were many weaknesses that were exploited that enabled this escape to be successful.
Michael, when we talk about just the operational aspect of this between law enforcement agencies, we talked a little bit about the conversations. Are they discussing like possible movements? Are they watching highways? What are some of the tactical things that that law enforcement is thinking about right now in order to try to catch these two suspects who, that they themselves have said are probably the two most dangerous of the 10 who escaped?
The law enforcement will be leaving no stone unturned. They will be looking in homeless shelters. They will be searching homeless persons that are around the city. But again, this perimeter has expanded. So other law enforcement agencies in the area further away, Houston, San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, this investigation is not limited to Louisiana. So the circle has expanded, and law enforcement will be doing all of those things.
How much more difficult is that, though? Because again, you mentioned the fact we know for at least two of those suspects were arrested as far west as Texas, just north of Houston. That expansion of that circle, how does that impact what law enforcement may be trying to do? And obviously, uh, the containment is not, limited to just a few blocks in New Orleans or in an area. They really, this really now has turned into a possible multi-state search. How difficult is it to execute those when it comes to searching for these two inmates?
As more time elapses, it becomes tremendously more difficult to try to catch these individuals. I think what we're looking at now is more than even a regional investigation. It's a nationwide investigation 2 weeks out.
How dangerous can a situation like this become, not only for them, but for law enforcement as well?
I think in this situation, we should assume that these two remaining inmates are armed and dangerous. Unequivocally, they're probably armed and dangerous. And it's important, if I could give them one piece of advice, if these escapees are watching this newscast, it's turn yourself in. Turn yourself in for your safety as well as for law enforcement safety. This is a very highly volatile situation. Obviously, these people do not want to be caught. They escaped. They've not been caught. They do not want to turn themselves in. And this is a very, very dangerous situation for the public, for these individuals, as well as for law enforcement. And law enforcement will do everything they can to mitigate that potential for violence in this investigation.
Yeah. That operation is obviously, when something like this is happening, it's 24/7, I'm assuming, correct?
It is. It absolutely is. There'll be a command post. There's a command post that's set up that is operational 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this command post will not rest until these inmates are caught.
Yeah. Uh, Michael, in all of your years in law enforcement, have you ever seen or heard anything? I mean, I'm sure you've heard of, escapes, but where does this rank on the on the scale of things that you may have been exposed to or things that you may have encountered in the course of your career?
It has been many, many years since I have heard of an escape that's like this. This is almost unheard of to have so many inmates escape at one time from a correctional facility.
Where do you think it may be too early to place blame, but where do you think those gaps were with allowing this to happen?
It's much too early to try to assess any blame on this. I think, however, whenever they do look back and see what caused this to happen, they will be looking at the correctional facility from which they escaped to see, were procedures being followed? How many employees were helping these inmates escape? It's imperative to get to the bottom of this, to identify what these vulnerabilities were, what these weaknesses were, to ensure this doesn't happen again from this facility or any other correctional facility.
Yeah. Michael Anderson, former retired FBI agent, thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate the information, the knowledge about, just kind of what is happening. I think a lot of folks they hear, obviously these inmates are still on the run, how law enforcement is approaching this. So we appreciate you giving us a bit of an insider perspective and pulling back the curtain a little bit to give us some information about what is being done behind the scenes in order to try to catch these two.
Thank you. The last thing I would say, Jonathan, let me just say this lastly, is that, we need the public's assistance to solve this case. If somebody sees something, they need to contact law enforcement immediately. Do not try to stop these people themselves. They need to contact law enforcement immediately to ensure their safety, the other public safety, the inmates' safety, as well as law enforcement safety.
A $50,000 reward for each of those inmates being offered to get them back into custody. You can find more information about that manhunt on our website at ktbs.com. Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of the ArkLaTex Crime Files. I'm Jonathan McCall.